I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to take a call on behalf of New Zealand First, following those lovely comments from the former National Speaker about all his colleagues, and there are a few more you could have thanked as well that are sitting over there, but we will move on to the real subject tonight, which is loan sharks. And it's all about not thanking other National Party people for their contributions at the Commerce Committee and not sort of doing all the backslapping, but this bill is about talking about, at the end of the day, you can have all the fine print in this bill, you can have all the fine print about what the money lenders and the loan sharks will be required to do, and all the fine print, but the fine print is so small that it can hardly be read, hardly be seen. Many of the people affected by this bill do not speak English or have very limited understanding of English, and they simply will be still taken for a ride as vulnerable people in our society who are borrowing money from unscrupulous loan sharks and money lenders. And in that respect, there's one party in this House that has been consistent on this, and that's New Zealand First. We have been consistent in saying that in terms of this legislation, the government is badly falling short. It is not recognising the fact that that last essential element of putting caps on interest rates would have been the ultimate determinant in this bill that would have really made all the difference. And so you can have all the fine print you like, and you can have all the assurances you like, but rest assured the unscrupulous lenders will still find ways around it and still find people who will sign up to things who cannot afford to borrow the money and end up paying exorbitant interest rates. We cannot understand the rationale of this national government in turning its back on other jurisdictions such as the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia, South Africa, Finland, most of the countries in Europe, and the national government here in New Zealand says we know better, far better than all these other countries. We will not put caps on interest rates, and yet these other countries will. We've heard from other speakers tonight mentioning some of the caps that are in place in some of these countries, the likes of 4% per month or 5% per month, that sort of thing, to keep things realistic, to keep things in single figures, to keep things in perspective to what people may realistically be able to afford to then pay back. But we have not heard from the National Party how they are going to address interest rates that are into double digits, skyrocketing, cumulative interest rates that end up in triple digits in some cases, and where people simply have no way of repaying the loans, and where families end up suffering, and where at the end of the day it is the children that end up suffering in many cases, where the children go without because simply the family is having to repay such huge amounts of interest to the loan sharks and the money lenders. And it's very sad, Mr Speaker, that the national government once again shows its lack of respect for social justice and its lack of empathy for those who are in most need to be protected and the most vulnerable in our society. And once again, it's probably because they all come from backgrounds where it doesn't apply to them, doesn't affect them, they're not affected, they don't have people in their families probably affected by it, and therefore it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, we don't care, too bad, hard luck, ain't going to go there. And quite frankly, it's very saddening that the National Party cannot recognise the fact that we as the Parliament and we as the House of Representatives have a duty of care and a duty of responsibility to the people of New Zealand to protect those who are most at risk and those who are most vulnerable. It's also interesting, Mr Speaker, that when Carol Beaumont brought in the amendment to bring in the interest on capped rates, which was a follow-on from a private member's bill a couple of years ago that Charles Javel originally drew up, and that, when it was a private member's bill, was put through with the support of the Honourable Peter Dunn in those days, 3 years ago. And Peter Dunn is on record, and in fact he wrote to one of his constituents saying how he was pleased to be supporting that particular piece of legislation, which included caps on interest rates, and he would look forward in the future to it being successful. Now, it's interesting that the Honourable Peter Dunn, a couple of years later, now Minister of Revenue, now a lackey to the national government, goes back on all those former assurances to support caps on interest rates and votes against it. And a couple of weeks ago, when this was in committee and when that amendment was put to the House to bring in interest rates, it was lost by one vote. And again, whose vote was it lost on? You don't have to guess, it was Peter Dunn's. Once again, Peter Dunn was the casting vote to ensure that caps were not brought in on interest rate. Talk about, as the Right Honourable Winston Peters has said in the past, talk about double-cross the bridge when he comes to it. That's Peter Dunn for you, and he certainly double-crossed the bridge and double-crossed the people of New Zealand in terms of this bill to ensure that interest rates had caps put on them. So, Mr Speaker, just in conclusion, I'm not going to labour the point, but the fact that in some future government that New Zealand First has a role in and where we have influence in, we will certainly ensure that the people of New Zealand, the vulnerable people of New Zealand, are protected in a greater manner and that interest rate caps are brought in. We believe it's in the interests of all New Zealanders to have this. We believe that we should be no different to many of the other major countries that I mentioned earlier, and as a result of that, New Zealand would be a far better place. We do not want to see the money lenders and the loan sharks ripping off good, hard-working Kiwi families and good, hard-working Kiwi workers. We want to protect them. New Zealand First will stand up for them and ensure that that is the case.
I call the Honourable Member Young Jen. Ni hao ma, and tolo.